Since time immemorial, humans have been fascinated by the supernatural, the unexplained, and the eerie tales that send shivers down our spines. Ghost stories have been passed down through generations, whispered around campfires and shared in hushed tones in dimly lit rooms. Please join me as we delve into the mysterious and sometimes frightening accounts throughout time. Welcome to another episode of the Ghost Files. War with Germany was going into its fourth year, and the overnight bombing raids took a heavy toll amongst the most densely populated areas of Britain. Bombs were dropped on strategic areas like the major ports, factories, coastal radar stations, railways and other industrial areas, and so this made London an obvious area of attack. Air raid shelters were built behind the properties in people's gardens. These were called Anderson shelters. But the other facility of keeping yourself safe from the frequent nightly bombing raids was using communal areas underground. This is where London's underground system played a crucial role. Now, put yourself in the shoes of the Londoners, who at this point were a weary but strong and resilient breed of people. The wartime spirit seemingly was ingrained in people, and they knew what to do when the air raid sirens sounded. It was a murky and wet night in wartime London. The dateline is March the 3rd, 1943, and the residents of Bethnal Green were anxiously waiting to see if there was going to be another German bombing raid. Bethnal Green Underground Station was a communal air raid shelter used by hundreds of people. It wasn't actually an underground station at this point, but just the works for one partially completed one. It actually opened as a station at the start of 1947, when the central line was extended from the Liverpool Street terminus to Stratford. It formed an effective air raid shelter because it didn't have any trains running through, like the other tube shelters did, and was still effectively a building site. Now, Berlin had took a heavy bombing raid by Allied forces just 2 days previous, and Londoners feared reprisals were just around the corner. A searchlight amid total blackout points to the skies as a loud siren sounds. 10 minutes later, there was what sounded like the whirring and the buzzing noises of bombs dropping from on high. The clock was showing 8:27 p.m. and the people rushing to the underground were hearing unfamiliar artillery noises. 3 extra busloads of people, which had pulled up nearby, ran off heading towards the underground, which swelled with numbers entering the station. The entrance to the station was not very well lit. In fact, a 25-watt bulb was all that was there, which I'm sure you'd agree seems pretty inadequate, but nonetheless people knew they had to get down there pretty sharpish. It had been raining earlier in the day, and the steps going to the initial landing area were very wet, and it was because of that a middle-aged woman and child slipped and fell, and what ensued was people falling over each other, each row falling on top of the ones in front of them. The terror they must have felt is unimaginable, as the last gasp of air was squeezed out of them, one by one. Now, we've all heard or seen of tragedies in the past where people have been in crushed situations, and sadly lots of people have lost their lives. Think of the Hillsborough football tragedy, also the Heysel Stadium disaster, and there's many more that have happened in the years gone by. So you can imagine what these people on the stairs were going through. It all unfolded in just 15 seconds. There was a cascade of people now falling. They were piling on top of each other as the push forward from the people at the street level continued, as they were unaware that anything had happened further down. There was no police on hand, or in effect no one controlling the crowds heading into the station. The design of the stairwell was narrow, and there was no handrails fitted. When air raid wardens and a single off-duty police officer finally heard the cries and the screams and the shouts, it was then they recognised that something serious was unfolding. It was only then that latecomers were held back. It wasn't long before the bodies were pulled out from the entrance, and sadly 27 men, 84 women and 62 children had succumbed to their injuries. People came forward looking for their loved ones, be it children looking for their parents, workmates looking for their colleagues, school children looking for their friends. It was a tragedy beyond belief. In the following days, the council began cleaning the abandoned shoes and other personal belongings. And what may seem perplexing to us now about the tragedy is that there was an embargo on the events, which meant no reporting was publicly done, so no one in Britain heard anything about it. I guess this was all done under the guise of national security and not giving the enemy any comfort in this news. And above all, I guess, risking lowering the morale of the rest of the country. While all these years passed, the station itself has been the scene of reported hauntings, from ghosts, apparitions, wispy mists of figures that frequent the area of the tragedy. Are these the very people who passed away in very traumatic circumstances? One reported account comes from a night worker on duty who did the locking up and then made his way to his office. What happened next sent shivers down his spine, as wailing, crying and screaming could clearly be heard. Are these sounds from the lost souls of that tragic event who met their untimely death? And are these entities forever trapped to be heard fighting for their lives on that wet night, March the 3rd, 1943? These stories are more than mere entertainment. They are a reflection of our deepest fears and our greatest curiosities. They connect us with a time when the world was less understood and the boundaries between reality and the unknown were blurred. They remind us of the fragility of life and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. Welcome to another episode of the Ghost Files. The London Underground, or the Tube, as most would call it, has always had some fascination for me. Maybe it's because, as a kid, I loved playing with trains. But as I delved into some of the creepier stories surrounding the Tube, it opened up a Pandora's box of strange, creepy stories. The London Underground has long been a source of fascination for ghost stories and supernatural tales, thanks to its vast network of tunnels, old stations and a long history. Many of these stories are rooted in tragic events, historical mysteries. There are so many ghostly stories of the London Underground system, you would be hard pushed to count them all. And you, like me, have probably used the Underground and never given a thought to the spooky and quite frightening experience that people have. But behind some of those tales lie explanations that ring true and make us question more than ever before if these sometimes ghoulish spectres may actually exist. One such tragic tale is of Sarah Whitehead. Now, to give you the background of this case, let me tell you that many years ago, the City of London had over 100 churches and all had graveyards attached. Most of these were filled with people who had died from the Black Death and other diseases. So it's of no surprise that over a period of time, many buildings were built. Bank Station, in the heart of the financial quarter, was built on said graveyards, as was the Bank of England. So you can imagine that there was plenty of strange and ghoulish activity reported around this area for many a year. But the one which stirs up people's emotions to this very day is the story of Sarah Whitehead. All this took place in the 19th century with Sarah's brother Philip Whitehead, who worked at the Bank of England. He adopted an extravagant lifestyle and started to speculate on the stock market. Now, this activity was not acceptable by the bank, so the directors of the bank offered that he could resign to avoid dismissal, and which he duly did. He then set himself up as a stockbroker, but found himself defrauding Roberts and Company by way of forging an acceptance to a bill. In those days, capital punishment was dished out to murderers and the like. What may be of surprise to you is that if you did lesser crimes like forgery, the same punishment would be coming to you. And so it came to pass that Philip was charged at the Old Bailey on the 2nd of November 1811. He was found guilty and hanged on the 29th of January 1812. Now, this may seem odd to you, as it does to me. To spare the feelings of his sister Sarah, the bank, and I presume it was the bank, never told her the fate of her brother. So now you have to remember that communication in those days was more haphazard, so it could be believed that she had not heard of his trial, and so was totally unaware of his punishment. One day Sarah turned up at the bank asking to speak to her brother Philip. The clerk, probably not realising who she was, told her the full story. The bank staff noticed as the days went on she used to come in on a daily basis, all dressed in black, with a black veil covering her face. She was nicknamed the Black Nun. According to the bank, Sarah used to come in and harass the customers and make a nuisance of herself. That was until the bank got fed up and in 1818 decided to pay her a large sum of money, provided that she stayed away. Well, at this point, you would do well to ask me, what has all this got to do with the underground? Well, when Sarah died, she was buried in the churchyard of Christopher Le Stocks, which later on became part of the bank's gardens. So not only has her ghostly figure been seen in and around the bank, but she haunts the bank underground station. Many staff and train commuters have seen the spectre, apparition, call it what you will, of Sarah, who walks with her head bowed to the ground as she haunts the area, forever looking for her brother. She is also seen in the area of Threadneedle Street, where many people have seen the thinly wispy ghost of Sarah Whitehead. Now, to me, this story is so sad, and you can only imagine the grief and heartbreak that Sarah felt, learning of her brother's trial and execution in the way that she did. The dismissive attitude the bank took when she came in on a daily basis must have been the catalyst for her mental decline. Her spirit, it seems, is forever trapped in this thin veil of the living and the dead, where the unreal mixes with our reality. People to this day tell of getting a feeling of immense sadness when passing through Bank Station. Wailings and groans throughout the platforms and tunnels leave many workers and travellers in a frightened state. Her ghost is said to be dressed in black, but curiously her face has changed over the years and has now rosy red cheeks. The sad tale of Sarah Whitehead certainly pulls at your heartstrings. The story in itself sends chills through my spine, and the trauma Sarah suffered at the time was obviously the catalyst of her decline in life. How much of these sightings of the ghost of Sarah Whitehead are actually true, of course, we'll never know. But the most chilling thing for me is to this day, she is heard asking passers-by, after she lifts her head and says, "Have you seen my brother?" So please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I would really appreciate that. And thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time.